All right, good morning, everyone. I am calling to order our regularly scheduled meeting of the Committee of the Whole. My name is Elizabeth Glidden. I am the chair of this committee, and I'm joined today by Council members Gordon, Reich, Andrew Johnson, Yang, Quincy, Goodman, and Fry, and we are a quorum of the committee. We have two items on our discussion agenda today. The first is adoption of our 2017 City Council and Standing Committees calendar. And I'll invite Mr. Carl maybe just to say a couple of words about this. To be honest, the calendar really doesn't need that much description and discussion, but it seems like every time we introduce it, someone has questions, so I wanted to allow that opportunity. Mr. Carl.
Good morning, Madam Vice President, members of the committee. My name is Casey Carl. I have the honor of serving as City Clerk. And as the Vice President mentioned, before the committee is a proposed calendar showing the dates and times that have been identified for regular meetings in 2017, both for the full City Council and for its standing policy committees. In addition, dates and times for regular meetings of the independent audit and executive committees are included on the calendar, even though those are not technically a part of the Council's standing committee system. The 2017 calendar as presented was drafted using long-standing guidelines that respect the observance of various holidays, significant dates, and known events. A total of 23 regular meetings of the full council have been programmed, which generally corresponds to the same number of regular meetings held thus far in each year of the current four-year term of council. And within each two-week cycle, the dates and times for regular meetings of standing policy committees have been identified in conjunction with the respective chairs of those committees. And these dates and times generally match the regular dates and times that have been used for the committee meetings over the past 3 years. Now, the meeting dates for committees are reflected by assigned colors shown in the legend at the bottom of the draft. I should note that the clerk's office was informed of one deviation from the draft that was submitted previously with your agenda. Specifically, the regular meeting for the audit committee shown for January 24 has been changed to January 10. And noting that one change, I believe that all other regular meetings shown on the draft are correct and is approved by the respective chairs. So in front of you at your desks is a version labeled version 3, which is the most current version of the calendar that's before you. The 11 holidays observed by the City of Minneapolis are identified with stars on the calendar detailed in the legend at the bottom of the page. In addition, the Council has identified 4 dates of significance when no meetings are to be scheduled, and these are reflected on the calendar with an X. Those dates are June 25, September 1, September 21, and September 30. And I'll note that because September 1 would normally have been a regular meeting for the full City Council, the calendar was slightly adjusted to move the regular meeting of the full Council to Thursday, August 31, and then the regular meeting of the Committee Whole was also moved to Tuesday, August 29. I believe this is the most significant deviation from the current year's 2016 calendar. There are a total of 7 ward work weeks programmed in the 2017 calendar, and this matches the same number of weeks over the past 6 years. These weeks are shaded in gray on the draft, and at the Vice President's suggestion, the work week usually scheduled in March has been moved to April. This aligns with the Minneapolis School District's scheduled spring break. So during those work weeks, no meetings of the full council or any of its standing policy committees are scheduled. The municipal election is noted on Tuesday, November 7, as another date when no meetings are programmed. And finally, the calendar shows the dates of the 2 conferences hosted by the National League of Cities. Those dates are March 11 through 15 and November 15 through 18. As provided under Minnesota statutes, Chapter 13D, Section 4, Subdivision 1, the adopted calendar serves as notice of all regular meetings. Once adopted, the 2017 calendar will be finalized and published by the clerk's office. Copies will be posted on the 2 bulletin boards located on the 3rd floor outside the council and clerk offices. Copies will also be made available from the city's website. And of course, copies are available from the clerk's office upon request from any interested person. Staff respectfully requests the affirmative recommendation of this committee to have the full council adopt its calendar for 2017. And furthermore, we request the council direct the clerk to publish and post the final calendar in the usual places and to authorize the clerk to adjust or modify the calendar throughout the coming year as necessary to accommodate the business needs of the council. And with that, I've concluded my remarks.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Carl. I'm going to go ahead and move approval of the calendar and the other items listed 2 and 3 of the directions to the city clerk, and then ask if there is discussion. I'll just note I don't have my speaker management up. All right, seeing no discussion, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, and that item is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have a very significant item, which is a Minneapolis 2040 update and open house preview. I will just note that there have been several updates already provided in the homes committees where this more traditionally resides, the zoning and planning and others. But because of the significance of this item and its touch to the entire enterprise, we thought this was appropriate to give an overview at this moment of Minneapolis 2040. And I want to thank Hyla Mays, Paul Mogush, and Beth Elliott for their work leading this undertaking, and they will be co-presenting today. All right.
Good morning, Madam Vice President, and thank you for dedicating this time for an update. As you can see, I came with quite a contingency of people, a lot of subject matter experts. We were anticipating your questions in advance, so be thinking of them as we present, because there will be time to talk about that elsewhere and to sort of get into more detail on the topics that you care about. My role in this presentation, before I hand it off to my colleagues, is to provide an update on what we've done to date in the comprehensive plan process, and to sort of say what has led us to this point. Then you'll be hearing from Paul and Beth about a preview of what's going to be shared with the public next week and what we hope to gain from that exercise. This is the growing list of City Council actions to date. I'm not going to go through these in detail, but just to note that we are setting a track record of checking in with different committees and folks as we move forward, so that as we build this, we cumulatively develop a policy together. This is a big document, a lot of scope, nothing that we can cover in full detail at any one given time, so it's important to establish a record of decision. This whole plan is based on 6 comprehensive plan values, which were identified by the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee. These form the basis for our decision process and are being interwoven throughout the document and the process to ensure that we're consistent. These are also very closely aligned with the city-adopted goals developed in other processes. Growth, equity, sustainability, livability, competitiveness, and good government are foundational values, and as this process moves forward, there'll be documentation of how these are being effectively addressed. The timeline and phase diagram is familiar to some of you who've had these updates. We are currently in the second stage of this process. Again, this is a cumulative one where at this point we're looking at big ideas, major themes, topics. As this moves forward, it'll be closer and closer to a more formulated policy. This process also has an engagement strategy that is very robust, well-developed, and already being implemented. As the last update we did with zoning and planning was a strategy for when engagement will happen and the close interaction between the content being developed internally, the public input, and how they're being brought together to shape the policy for the city. These policy topics are the format for our internal work on this process. The vast majority of these have a working group known as research teams that have been meeting for several months and have developed a depth of work and detailed data and supporting information to inform that. We will not be able to go through today the scope of all the work that's been done. We have already spent a lot of time trying to synthesize, bring together, and look at the major themes that we want to highlight for the public, really the areas where we need substantive input, that we're not just asking questions to ask them, but we're asking questions that will guide and make a difference in how we shape the future for the city. Behind each of these, though, I should say, there is a good substantial amount of internal work that is being carried forward and will continue to be part of the process. This is a quick overview of engagement to date. Again, lots of different opportunities for input. I won't go into that in detail, but just to say that this next stage is being built in the context of that. And I also want to note that we are not just doing, engagement is not an exercise just to keep ourselves busy or to do for the sake of show. As we've been going through, we've been pulling out the major themes, the topics we hear, what's important to people, what they care about the most, what they want us to focus on. Does that always line up perfectly with the legal mandate for the comprehensive plan? Not always, because it is vital that we hear what is important to people and that we reflect that in our work. So some of the themes you see here are things that have come up again and again, and we're making sure that they're being addressed through the process. There's a lot of different creative approaches, and you'll get to hear a preview next for them. But this is a way for people who are wonks to engage, people who really know these subjects, but also folks who've never even heard of a comprehensive planning process. We want to make it accessible to people, even people who might not be ready to write things yet. So at this point, I'm going to turn over to Paul to talk about the preview.
Thank you, Hyla. Good morning, Madam Vice President and council members. My name is Paul Mogish on the Long Range Planning Team in CPED. So Hyla showed you that long list of policy topics, the 15 policy topics earlier, and mentioned that staff has been working for some time on assembling data and information about all of those topics. Next month, we as staff will begin the work of teeing up the major policy questions that need to be answered in this plan related to all of those topics. But getting that work underway now would be premature without first checking in with the people of Minneapolis on these issues and starting to hear from their experiences. So we have a few questions that we would like to ask the people of Minneapolis, which I'll be walking through in a moment. But first, I just want to note, as we've been looking through this data and talking about it, sorting through it, maybe this is obvious, but it's something that we wanted to say out loud, is while a comp plan focuses, of course, on the built environment, that's the core of what a comprehensive plan is about, the city is first and foremost made up of people. And this plan, while it shapes the future of the physical city, it's really, at the end of the day, about people. So we want to ask people about their personal experiences before we start developing these policies that will shape the city. And we've landed, while there are lots of topics that are covered in this comprehensive plan, for the purposes of beginning this conversation with the people of Minneapolis, we've organized the questions around these four topics: transportation, jobs, housing, and environment, and then some overarching questions at the end about people's vision for a healthy and equitable city overall. One of the ways that we're inviting people to engage with these questions is on the project website, Minneapolis2040.com. This is a screenshot of what that looks like, but you can check it out yourself. We're encouraging anybody who's interested to take a look at that, spend some time looking at the content that we've provided, and answer the questions, which I'll be walking through in a moment. If you wouldn't mind going back to the screenshot for a moment, I just want to point out that for each of these topic areas, we provide some context with text and some infographics, charts, maps. These are not necessarily intended to be comprehensive and covering everything related to these topics, but it's intended to show that we have gathered some data. This is going to be part of the process, and to provide some context and get the juices flowing for people when they're answering these questions. After the context for each topic, we have a quick blurb about what the city is already doing on this particular topic. And then finally, and most importantly, a question or two that we're asking folks to answer about their personal experiences with this topic. So walking through briefly what some of this information is about and the questions that we're asking folks. On the subject of transportation, of course, we know many of you probably saw this recently. We have some new data from the census, from the American Community Survey, that shows that in Minneapolis, more and more people are traveling by walking, biking, and taking transit, which is great news. We continue to build out a multimodal transportation system with plans for much more in the future. So the central question to answer on transportation in this comprehensive plan is, what does that network look like going out 25 years, and how can it help us accommodate the growth of the city?
Mr. Mogish, I was actually going to put myself, if you could go back a slide.
Absolutely.
So, we can see that there is growth in the public transportation usage from 2005 to 2015. Mm-hmm. But, in terms of significance, it does not appear very significant. And I don't know how we are analyzing this in context of what the Met Council also analyzes, and how much this relates to kind of marketing and personal choice and all those kinds of things versus lack of growth in the transit system. So I was just curious on that fact, because I think that's one that, seeing these other numbers change and such a small change in public transportation seems significant to me.
Madam Vice President, What I'll say about that is probably the number that tells the clearest and most definitive story out of this is the top one. It is clear that the proportion of folks commuting to work by car, truck, or van is going down substantially. You're absolutely correct that we can't take a lot away from, there isn't a lot to learn necessarily from this set of data on public transportation alone. You'll notice there's a caveat there that the change in itself is actually within the margin of error of the American Community Survey. But this is just one piece of evidence. And at this point, the purpose of this is to help people see themselves in this in terms of their everyday experience with moving around the city in order to answer the question that I'll show in a moment. Very briefly, I will not read all this, I promise. But briefly on what the city is doing on transportation, this is not news to any of you on the dais, but what we're highlighting for folks in the public in this process are things like the recently adopted Complete Streets policy, the upcoming development of pedestrian realm guidelines, and of course the big incoming infusion of investment in rebuilding our streets. The important part here is the questions that we're asking folks. How do you want to get around the city today, and how do you think your transportation needs will change by 2040? So the purpose of this is to start to draw out some stories from folks that we can use when we're done with this focused month of engagement to sit back, read all of this, analyze it, and pull out themes that on a topical basis we can send forward to the staff who are developing draft policies on all these topics. So people can answer this how they would like. We wanted to make sure we provided some cues about today and some cues about the future out to 2040, or tomorrow, 5 years from now, however people want to talk about this. All right. I better move through a little more quickly. On the subject of jobs, the Met Council forecasts substantial job growth in Minneapolis through 2040 on the order of an additional 150,000 jobs or so. And this plan will need to lay out a strategy for how this job growth can benefit everyone. Because as we know, we have a persistent gap between white people and people of color when it comes to employment and income. We don't have the answers to lay out right now, but that we want to make sure that we're being very upfront about that and putting that expectation out there that one of the things this plan needs to do is to address this gap and address equity in general as it pertains to all the topics of the comprehensive plan. What we're highlighting for people in terms of what the city is doing today on jobs, we highlight the recently passed ordinance on paid sick leave, making sure people know that engagement will be beginning soon on the potential minimum wage.
Sorry,
increase.
Mr. Mogish, I missed a question from Councilmember Bender, so it probably is on the past slide.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to note, maybe on the last slide, that I had the chance recently to look back through the ward profiles that the Long Range Planning Division created a couple of years ago. And each of these items also has a geographic component to it that I think will be important in this sort of phase where we're understanding the city, both from data and from people's personal experiences, but also in terms of our policy development as we go forward. Because we do have specific geographic concentrations of unemployment, for example, which even if you look ward by ward is pretty significant. So just wanted to note that because this is looking citywide, but I think an exciting opportunity in the comprehensive plan is because it is, it can be both citywide policies, but we can also do what I think of as more geographically targeted approaches.
And the questions that we're asking on the subject of jobs are, what opportunities do you need to help you feel financially stable and secure? And then the future question is, how will your employment needs change between now and 2040? On the subject of housing, first, just to look at historic population in the city and the Met Council projections for the future. We know that we hit our historic high in 1950 at 521,000. Today, and we're at around 411,000, and the Met Council projects growth to 459,000 in terms of population in the future. So on the subject of housing, we know that we have a diverse range of housing options, but the options differ from place to place across the city, getting to that geographic element. And as we know, far too many people face difficulty finding housing that is affordable to them. This is showing that between 2000 and 2013, 20,000 housing units became unaffordable to households at or below 50% of the regional median income. So just as with jobs and all the other topics, that is a task ahead of us in this comprehensive plan to put forward policies that will address this. On the subject of what the city is doing, of course, the city financially supports the development and preservation of affordable housing, and there are efforts underway right now to explore new and creative ways to increase the supply and availability of affordable housing to those who need it most. The questions we're asking on this subject are you satisfied with the housing options available to you right now? And if not, what's missing? And then the future question is, how will your housing needs change between now and 2040? The environment, obviously a very big topic. And when we're talking about the growth of the city, we need to have a strategy for, of course, growing sustainably. Climate change is among these topics. There are many. But where the opportunity lies in a policy, one of the places that the opportunity lies in a policy document such as the comprehensive plan is in our land and our built environment. So bringing it back around to the built environment, the city is about 2/3 parcelized land, property owned by people or companies or nonprofits or the government, and 1/3 right-of-way, with, of course, surface water in there too. And the comp plan has influence over all of these topics. So it's a very important policy opportunity to make a difference in terms of environmental sustainability. Of course, there are lots and lots of subtopics that come under this topic. Among them is food policy. This just happens to be a map of where we have farmers markets around the city. But there are many other topics too. Among those that we're highlighting of what the city is doing is, of course, we have a goal of reducing carbon emissions 80% by 2050. We're hiring a chief resilience officer. We have the green zones pilot. The list goes on. The questions we're asking on this topic are we doing enough to improve the environment? And if not, what's missing? And the future question being, how do you think your life will be different in the future as a result of climate change? In addition, so those are the four topics, jobs, housing, transportation, and the environment. But we'll also be asking folks to zoom out a little bit and look at the future of the city in a holistic sense, asking people what does your ideal Minneapolis look like in 2040? What makes you feel connected to your neighborhood and your city? And what do you love about your neighborhood, and what would you like to change? And this is where, transitioning to Beth, who's going to talk about the open houses in particular, it's these questions where I think the engagement that we'll be doing with folks next week at the Midtown Global Market and North Commons Park, where I think people are going to have the most fun with this, and will be a great opportunity for interactive dialogue with folks. So, going to Beth and the open houses, I just want to say that these opportunities, these questions, and this information, just once again, are available on the website. That's one way for people to engage on these questions. That's not the only way. And I want to make sure that people know that at these open houses next week, it will not feature a guy in the suit standing in front of a microphone talking through all this data. It's going to be a lot more fun than that, a lot more interactive than that, and Beth is going to tell us about it.
Mr. Mogish, could I ask a quick question?
Sorry.
Thanks. I just wanted to note that so we have these three kind of topic themes, which are jobs, housing, and streets. And then you had included a specific look at the lens of environment, but not health or racial equity, which we know are two also really important themes that we've highlighted in all of the past council resolutions that you went through. Could you talk more about how health and racial equity are showing up in this part of the engagement and research? I know that the health department has done a significant amount of research through the research teams. So I just want to make sure that we don't kind of lose those two important lenses.
Sure. Madam Vice President, Councilmember Bender, on the subject of health, the approach that staff group has been taking is one of health in all policies. One thing that has become clear to staff as we've been going through all this data and research and information that people have been gathering is that everything is related to everything. There's lots of ways to slice and dice this. But really, health is probably the one topic that really truly does touch every other topic in the comprehensive plan. And those of us in the planning world know that that has become an important part of the practice of planning, incorporating health, public health into all aspects of the planning. So you'll start to see that emerge more as the process goes on. And I suspect that with these questions that we're asking the public, those topics will emerge, those themes will emerge in people's personal experiences related to their personal health, the health of the community, and what people define as a healthy community. And same for racial equity. That is something, of course, that permeates all of these topics. I highlighted a couple of examples of how that plays into this. Obviously, those are not the only examples. And again, I think with these questions that we're asking, that those themes will start to emerge. And we'll be tasking each of the staff groups developing draft policy with not only incorporating those 6 values that include racial equity, but also showing their work in terms of how exactly are they incorporating those values, so that as we come back to the council and to the public, as the process goes on, we'll be teeing that up and showing our work on that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mogush.
I'd also like to add to that a little bit.
Why don't you introduce yourself first?
Hi, I'm Beth Elliott, everybody.
There are people watching, and not everyone knows you.
I'm Beth Elliott, Principal City Planner. My job is to make sure the engagement process